Florida braces for a hurricane. The president suggests delaying the election and the worst economic data ever recorded in this country. Plus, love hate 8 to end the week and the month. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Friday, July 31st. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Jill, we made it. I can't figure out if July went fast or if it went slow. I can't, for that matter, I can't figure out, is this year going by fast or slow? What even is time?
It's so funny. I don't know. Someone asked me who I hadn't spoken to the other day. I got a text that was just like, how are you? And it's like, where do you start? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. Oh, God, that's good.
All right, well, let's start this podcast, Carlo, with the weather. Isaias, I think that is the correct pronouncer, is now a Category 1 hurricane with 80-mile-per-hour winds as it tracks toward Florida after pounding Puerto Rico with heavy rain and winds, knocking out power. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach all under tropical storm watches.
Yeah, so the latest projections have Isaias, and by the way, a lot of people are calling this thing Isaias, which is what it is written as, but it's actually Isaias, according to the National Weather Service, at least. Anyway, the latest projections have it swiping southern and eastern Florida this weekend. So Florida is not going to get a direct hit, it doesn't look like, which is good. However, it looks like it's the latest models have it sort of like riding up the eastern seaboard next week, which means you pretty much have to pay attention to this. If you live anywhere from Miami to Boston, I think we're probably all going to get a taste of this storm in the coming days.
Okay. It is supposed to cool off this weekend here in the Northeast.
It's raining right now here in Brooklyn, at least.
Yeah. All right, Carlo. Herman Cain, a prominent Republican businessman. He ran for president in 2012 and was close with President Trump. He has died following a long hospitalization with the coronavirus. He was 74 years old. There's no way to know how or when he got infected, but he did post photos of himself without a mask while attending that Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 2 weeks before he was hospitalized.
It's really sad. He was, 74, like you said, which is, not that old. I want to be careful, obviously, because I hate when anyone on any side of the political spectrum dies and people like revel in their death because of hypocrisy on their part or whatever. Nobody should do that, right? This is tragic for his family, just like it's been tragic for, the 150,000 families who have lost somebody from this disease. I think if there's any if there's ever a silver lining in anybody's death, which is almost like a tacky thing to say, but it's that, maybe some people who haven't been taking this so seriously will do so now. I mean, Cain was, he was pretty out there in the press about sort of like, saying that he wouldn't really wear a mask and that the virus, I think his account was tweeting that this was a hoax before he died. So anyway, my condolences to Mr. Cain's family. I'll leave it at that. But the other things on COVID to mention to note today: the federal jobless benefits run out today. Senators have left Washington for the weekend. They have not come to an agreement on a new rescue package. So those, if you are dependent on those, or if you're getting those $600 a week, they are going to lapse now. Also, Dr. Fauci is on the Hill today. He's testifying in front of the House this morning on the topic of vaccines and testing and school reopening. So we may get some good insight there from the good doctor. And another thing I wanted to note that I just saw a minute ago is Politico is reporting that the distribution of a vaccine is going to now be a joint effort between the CDC and the Department of Defense, the Pentagon. That's very unusual, but the idea would be that you would sort of marshal the resources of the Pentagon to get this thing out like the minute it is approved, which again, if we're lucky, will be in early 2021.
That is good, because one of the really big concerns about the vaccine is that even if you get a vaccine that proves safe and effective is that distributing it won't really happen in a fast or effective way. So, I
Right.
mean, it doesn't even matter if you have a vaccine that works. If you can't get it to people who need it, what's the point?
Exactly.
And there had been concerns, will there be enough vials? I mean, it's not as easy as just like, all right,
Yeah,
off
yeah,
the
yeah.
assembly line, send it out. It's
Right.
actually a complicated thing. So that is, I think, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, this is a national security issue when you think about it. So I think the Pentagon getting involved and getting this thing out, absolutely. Why not?
All right. Top Republicans even now rejecting one of the president's suggestions. He floated this as part of a tweet yesterday, complaining about mail-in ballots. He was suggesting that the November election be delayed. I do want to make clear the president does not actually have the authority to delay an election. It's Congress who sets the date of the election. The tweet came minutes after the government reported the worst economic data ever. But polls as well showed the president losing to Joe Biden, both nationally and in swing states. Um, but that was pretty shocking, Carlo,
Look,
even by today's standards, right?
I mean, I appreciate that we have all lost the capacity to be shocked by anything this year. I really do, let alone a tweet from President Trump. But it is worth saying, even by today's standards, like you said, Jill, this is a truly insane and deeply dangerous thing for the president to suggest. He was just doing it to own the libs and the media. Like, whatever, man. Like, this is what they do in places like Egypt. Delay elections. It's embarrassing. If you're an American, you should cringe when you see something like this. I don't even really know what else to say about it.
Okay, I think it raises a couple of questions. I think the first one is I think we have to come to terms right now. I mean, you and I have been covering politics and presidential elections long enough to know what goes on election night, in
Right.
terms of what even media companies do. I mean, it is like the biggest night. You've got your plan. When do you feel comfortable calling it, at what hour? I
Right.
mean, it's very clear that this year we probably won't have results on election night, right? And it's also
I
very
don't know if
clear.
I think it's certainly a possibility. Yeah, it all
I mean, I
depends. I
think
mean,
that. Sorry, go on.
no, no, no. I think it's a possibility just because of how messy it's going to be this year with the mail-in ballots and with lines at polling stations. It all depends on the what the margin is, right? If this is a blowout from either way, it'll be done and dusted by the time we go to bed.
I mean, it also does seem like we aren't totally ready as a country, infrastructure wise, for everybody to do mail in ballots. But we have time. We should just get ready. I mean, ultimately, it's not out of our control that it's going to be a chaotic process with results. Like,
Right.
we knew the coronavirus existed in March and that it probably will come back with a vengeance in the fall, right as election season is in full swing and vote and election day in November. So there is an opportunity to say, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that if people do vote by mail in mass numbers as we're expecting, that it is a more organized and we just whatever it is to ensure that the results, that everyone who votes by mail, that those votes are all counted. We should be doing it. It's not a foregone conclusion that this would be a chaotic situation. It also does raise a question that I can't even believe we need to ask, that but a lot of people, especially in liberal circles, is that the president would just refuse to leave office or accept the results if he loses.
That is a real question that's being asked out there. I've heard it. I've heard it among people just in my circles. I personally don't find it particularly concerning. People on the left will find a reason to worry about anything. It's just like that's just part of like the liberal mindset, I think. However, that said, there is a scenario that worries me, just as an American who likes democracy. And that is that if the election is close, like what we were just talking about, and it comes down to a single swing state, right? Imagine that we don't have the results in a Wisconsin, right, or a Florida, and the count is a mess because of COVID and the mail-in ballots, and there's all these long lines, and there's voting irregularities. and we don't have a winner called on election night, then the lawsuits start flying, right? And then we're talking about a situation where maybe this goes to the Supreme Court. And I'm not just floating this like for the hell of it. There's a non-zero chance of that happening. And I think if that happens, it's all bets are off. On the issue of mail-in voting, though, Jill. Also, by the way, I harbor this sort of like secret theory that President Trump actually secretly wants to lose. I know he wouldn't want to be called a loser, but I honestly just don't think he really wants to be president anymore. And I mean, he would have a pretty good life in the private sector, right? He would probably start some sort of media company that would do very well. But on the topic, just not to belabor it, but on the topic of mail-in voting, mail-in voting is basically just absentee voting, right? There's plenty of people who vote absentee, including the president himself. So I don't really see what the big deal is.
I have voted absentee before. I mean,
yeah, sure. So have I.
College.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see what the big deal is. I get that maybe it's an issue if people in droves do it just because of like a backlog. The one caveat to that is that the Postal Service is an absolute mess right now. They have this huge backlog of mail. They're cutting services and hours because they don't have any money. But for the record, the post office has told people who can request mail-in ballots to do so at least 15 days before the election and to mail them a week before, just to be certain.
Okay, so maybe it was a coincidence, but the president did send that tweet out literally minutes after the Commerce Department reported that the U.S. economy had its biggest collapse on record last quarter. GDP, it's the measure of all goods and services produced in the country, dropped 9.5%, or the equivalent of an annual drop of about 33%. So this is twice as much as GDP declined during the Great Recession, and this happened in 3 months as opposed to 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we were sort of expecting a number like this, but it's still amazing to see. It's amazing to see the charts that just show the decline, like the quarterly decline, as historically speaking. But first of all, I don't think it was a coincidence that he sent that tweet out after this data came out, because I think it's sort of obfuscation there. But I do think that, the recent economic data, basically all of it suggests that the recovery that we're in is stalling at best. Another 1.4 million people filed jobless claims last week. We've become sort of a nerd to that kind of data. But think about that. We're like 20 weeks into this thing. Another 1.5 million people filed for unemployment. That's really bad. And I know that we differ on this, but to me, it makes clear that you have to extend these jobless benefits and just, sort out the issues later. Just because, the virus is not done. It's quite the opposite. It's spreading. And until we have this thing under control and we can help the people who are up the river, by no fault of their own, I just think that, I think that there's a recipe for an even bigger economic collapse ahead of us. I hope I'm wrong.
Carlo, we have talked, the additional, the fact that more people are, the number of people applying for first-time benefits is going up. At the end of July is just, way in the wrong direction here. We've talked about how it's like two different economies right now. And that has never been more apparent than after the closing bell on Wall Street yesterday. So a day after the top 4 tech CEOs took a bit of a lashing from Congress, all of their companies reported quarterly earnings, and the results were eye-popping. Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google all easily topped expectations for the quarter, which was about as unusual as a fiscal quarter can get. Combined, they made $28 billion in profit. The one big catch, for the first time, Google did report a decline in its revenue. Amazon in particular, Carlo, was one that the numbers, even for Amazon, were insane.
Yeah.
Their revenue jumped 40% from just the year before.
Incredible.
And this is at a time, just think about the retail industry. So Amazon's profits up 40% at a time when so many retailers are filing for bankruptcy and just struggling to keep their doors open.
Yeah, Jill. I mean, Amazon. I was thinking about this the other day. Like the hooks in our bathroom closet or our bedroom closet fell down while we were away, and I had to get new hooks. Right. So like normally I would just go to the hardware store, which is not far away from our house, and get them. No big deal. But I just got them on Amazon, and they were here the next day. Like they have created such an efficient business model that it's just hard almost not to use them from a consumer standpoint. But back to what you said about Google, their advertising revenue declining. That makes sense, right? There's just so many people, so many companies are cutting back on advertising, especially travel companies, which use Google a lot. Like when was the last time you saw an ad for like the Sandals Resort in Jamaica or whatever? Also, Facebook saw its slowest revenue growth since it went public, so that's a little bit of a red light, a flashing light for them. But they also keep adding users, especially in the developing world. So they continue to fire on all cylinders.
And
These
one of
companies,
the things
these companies, Jill, are like you said, it's like a different playing field, right? They're operating on a different level than the rest of the economy.
And I also think, sometimes in the media, we get caught up on these stories that we think are big deals and no one else actually cares. And
Yeah.
one of those is a lot of these bigger companies that have pulled their advertising from Facebook over its stance on the president's
Right.
posts and whatnot. Their users are like up
They don't care.
dramatically. No one
Yeah.
cares. Everyone just wants to use their social media and share their posts and look at their friends' pictures and stalk their exes, and it is what it is. I mean, that's I
You
don't
know what
know.
I say, Jill?
Pardon?
No, I said,
What did you say?
you know my theory that the best thing you can do for your personal happiness is to delete your Facebook account.
I thought it was Instagram. I guess it's the same thing.
No, no, no. I'm less bearish on Instagram, but it's still poisonous.
It's funny because I actually, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but Facebook has let me connect. I have started it because as a mom, I have now used Facebook, I think, more for its intended purpose, which is to like connect with mom groups. And
Sure.
I've looked for babysitters and nannies, and I'm on a food allergy group. Like I feel like I actually use Facebook for ways that
Like
do
as it's
improve my
intended. Yeah.
life versus Instagram, which I think has become kind of like a time suck. But
Totally.
okay, I do want to end here because former President Obama, I don't know if anyone caught it, but it was incredible. He eulogized John Lewis yesterday as a founding father of America's future. He delivered a rousing tribute to the civil rights icon while simultaneously condemning those in power for their record on Lewis's legacy of voting rights. Obama, who has reportedly been increasingly candid in private about what he thinks of the current administration, also called for the elimination of the filibuster, statehood for D.C. and Puerto Rico, and making Election Day a holiday. It was a pretty incredible speech, Carlo.
It was, and I think if you have a few minutes and you haven't seen it, you should watch this eulogy. Whatever you think of the man himself, he's an incredible public speaker, and he's a particularly great eulogist. Remember, he gave a great eulogy for John McCain, who was his opponent in 2008. When was that? Last year, but yeah, it was a really nice moment, I think. And John Lewis also, the New York Times yesterday, if you hadn't seen it, they published his. He wrote like a final op-ed for the paper that he asked them to publish on the day of his funeral, and it was again really just powerful words from a real icon of civil rights.
I got the chills reading it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's powerful, and I think it is a must read. Okay, and on that, Carlo, we are gonna just end this thing really light as we tend to do on Fridays. I want to end with some Love Hate 8.
Oh
And
yes,
I
I missed it last week.
I know we just didn't do it. I
know.
I put pause on Love Hate 8. But
Well,
one
good.
thing
It's
that
our
we
thing.
Yes, it is. Okay, one thing that we love, going to a regular doctor's appointment during COVID. You don't have 2 hours of sitting around in the waiting room, and it is easy to get an appointment. You're in and out. I had I had a doctor's appointment recently, and it was a pleasure.
That's pretty amazing. I wouldn't have thought that. I thought this actually reminds me of a hate that I have had in the chamber for one of these weeks, which is why are doctors always late? Like no matter what, You have to wait for the doctor. Why? Even if there's nobody else in the waiting room. That's something that's always stuck in my craw a little bit. Anyway, one thing
And
we hate.
there's nothing
Yeah,
worse, by the way, than waiting in a doctor's waiting room, especially if it's a doctor that's like a primary care doctor where there's people who are actually
just
sick.
sick
And this is
and
even
coughing all over
pre-COVID,
you.
right? Like, no,
Yeah,
thank you. In a regular flu season, not into it. I don't need to sit and listen to everyone coughing.
totally.
So,
That
and
actually jives with my one thing we hate this week, which is when anybody is holding up the line in any situation, right? So the variations can include, the person who gets to the front of the TSA line and then just doesn't follow the directions, the person at the traffic light who doesn't immediately go, and my personal favorite, which is the people who still write checks in the cashier line at the grocery store. That there needs to be a law against that at this point. If you're going to if you're going to pay by check, at least write. I guess you can't write it out because you don't know how much it's going to be until the last minute. But that you got to ban that.
and also one thing that we ate, fresh watermelon on what felt like a 150-degree day, refreshing and sweet. But get us back into the air conditioning, please, because it's hot out here.
Yeah, I actually had some very soggy watermelon yesterday, which is like the
Uh,
opposite of fresh watermelon. It's the delta between good watermelon and bad watermelon, really among the higher spreads in fruit, I think.
well, you need to eat the watermelon pretty close to when you cut it.
Yeah,
Because we, in this house, we like to have big bowls of fresh fruit, and like day 3 of the watermelon is
yeah, it
just,
gets a little
it's
grimy. Well,
barely edible.
I made the mistake of buying it like at a bodega where it's already cut. That's just don't ever do that. It
I
always looks
I
like it's going to
always
be
feel
good
like
and it
those
never.
are pretty good.
Oh, not out here.
I was a big bodega fruit fan.
Some of it can be good. Okay. Anyway, before we go, send us more emails. We got a lot yesterday. They were all great. It was great to hear from some of you guys in Alabama, South Dakota, where else? Florida,
Chicago.
Tennessee, Chicago. It's so interesting to hear from people all around this great country of ours. So yeah, keep them coming. I got nothing better to do this weekend, so.
Me neither. All right, bye everybody.